Good evening and welcome to Momentous Live, episode 60. I'm Tristan Jutra.
And I'm Tasia Custodi in my uniform for every live stream.
You know, my father, back in the 60s, mid 60s, he was fancied himself a bit of a beatnik. And he would kind of wear the same kind of clothes all the time. And I think he had a turtleneck, and I don't know if he wore a beret or not, and probably some jeans. But every time he'd go out, his mother would say to him, "Oh, so I see you've got your uniform on again." Having a uniform makes it easy. Steve Jobs at the Izzy Miyake black mock neck and jeans and New Balance sneakers every day. Less
Every
mental
day.
overhead.
It's great.
Tasia, it's just you and me this week.
It is.
We missed
for the
you
first
last
time.
week. Exactly. Is it the first time it's just been the two of us?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
The two of us. I won't sing.
Yes,
You know
okay.
the song.
Yes. Will sings it every time. It's just
I was going to
him and
say,
me.
I'm replacing Will tonight as the solo endeavor with you. So, apologies. I'll try to live up to his standards.
And I think I've done a two-up with Jamie Reynolds, friend of the show, the incomparable Jamie Reynolds as well. So, but I think Will, it's been a couple of times. Unfortunately, Gray couldn't join us. He's at a show this evening, and Will has a family health emergency. But so, best wishes to all of them, especially Will and his family. Momentous TV, you can Momentous.tv if you want to find out more about us. Facebook.com/MomentousTV, Twitter.com/MomentousTV, Instagram.com/Momentous.tv. On YouTube, search my name there and look for the Momentous playlists. So let's start with some follow-up. Tasia, you didn't get a chance to join us last week, so there are a couple of stories that you didn't get to have fun with, except one of these stories has been dragging out for 3 or 4 weeks, so you have had some exposure.
I wonder what it is.
You wore your uniform. So the first thing is last week we were talking about, there was the whole back and forth. Elon had made an offer. He had bought into Twitter, and then he's going to be on the board of directors, and then he declined the board seat, and then he decided to make an offer for all of Twitter, and then Twitter was enacting a poison pill. They were going to offer discounted shares to a whole bunch of shareholders in order to dilute the shares and make it difficult for an acquisition. It's a hostile takeover. But then it seems like they've changed their mind, and the board did diligently review the offer, and it appears there were no other offers forthcoming. So it looks like Uncle Elon is going to be the sole owner of Twitter by the end of the year. He and or some other private equity partners. End of the year, it should be finalized. So, of course, the internet is setting its hair on fire. All sorts of hot takes from all over the place. It looks like the amount he offered, which was his first and only and final offer at $54.20 a share, because he, of course, had to put $4.20 in there, valuing the social media platform at $44 billion. Before we get into some of the other takes, what's your initial gut reaction to this, Tasia?
Not surprised. We talked about this a couple weeks ago when he declined the board seat. We were like, this is the perfect setup for him to buy Twitter. Not surprised. Also not surprised that they agreed. I don't know. There were a lot of people online, couldn't believe it. How could Twitter agree to this? It's a good offer. That's how they agreed to it. Yeah. More than fair. I believe more than market value, just in my opinion. But
it was up to 70 some odd dollars last year, but it's been declining since then. And if there's no other suitors, especially like they think the markets were pretty frothy last year, so maybe it was just the beneficiary of that.
Yeah, I think I don't expect anything to change overnight. Everybody that's freaking out, all these little keyboard warriors online that are freaking out and going to get off the platform, and they just can't believe another billionaire gets to own whatever. And it's like, oh my God. Nothing will change overnight. The changes that are going to be implemented, I guarantee you the first things we start seeing into next year are things that Twitter's probably already working on. Like, I don't know what people expect, that it's just they think he bought it and today he has taken over and tomorrow there's going to be new code. Like, I just don't know how they think it works behind the scenes. To
Yeah.
implement a new feature in any platform takes a lot of time and work. So yeah, so there's just a lot of people getting their knickers in a knot, if you will. I don't really have an issue with it. I think people's biggest issues are they're worried about his whole free speech stance,
Mhm.
um, which you can read into what he tweeted. Was it today or yesterday? Days are blending together with this, so it's hard to remember. I think it was today. He made a statement about what he considers to be free speech.
Mhm.
Trying to clarify, didn't really clarify in typical Elon fashion.
Mhm.
And I think that's people's biggest gripe right now, is they're worried that it's going to become a platform for misinformation. Because if you allow all speech, that means I could say something that is completely incorrect and not based in any fact, and you
Mhm.
will not censor me in any way because it's my right to say what I want to say. We'll see what happens.
Yeah,
There's
and that's
also a difference, in a government censoring you or a privately owned company censoring
yep.
you, which doesn't infringe on your speech. But anyway, and it is, if it is his company to own, that's his prerogative. If you don't like it, you don't have to be on it. Twitter's already taken steps to try to allow people to flag misinformation. Now you can kind of like downvote things similar to like a Reddit or something, um, so that Twitter knows, like, is this an accurate tweet from somebody, or what are they doing? And then on the back end, they can kind of monitor, like, does this account always post stuff like this? So there's already these things in the works. My concern would be if he was getting rid of those type of metrics.
Mhm.
I have no issue with it being still a free open platform and us policing ourselves in those ways of saying, like, this doesn't seem, um this is misinformation. I can let Twitter know that this is misinformation, and then they will take care of it or not. But to me, I just think everybody's overreacting. That's my long way of saying everybody is overreacting.
Exactly. Well, yeah, a lot of it's TBD, right? Are
Yeah.
you really going to move to Canada if the person that you vote for doesn't
No.
become president?
None of you moved. None of you moved. Okay.
Are
Y'all
you
told
really going to
me.
leave Twitter if, this happens, which it looks like it is?
Right.
So, what are you going to go to Facebook? You're going to spend more time on Facebook? Really?
Right.
So, I mean, everything's terrible. But so yeah, let's just. So the deal looks like it's going to go through. Let's. There's so much ink digital ink is being spilled on this. Of course, there's a great overview on The Verge, highlighting some of the key issues, and we'll leave all these links in the show notes for those who are interested. We touched on the free speech issue a little bit. Again, freedom of speech doesn't mean freedom of reach. Freedom of speech, as the way it's in these. The amendment to the U.S. Constitution has to do with the government shall not be restrict speech except in very limited circumstances. And private platforms, they can do what they want. Now, it's a
Yep.
question of principles of an organization, though. Like, what are the values of your company? If you believe in free speech, then you would be doing things that make it a bit more open, and you might have tools for people to flag misinformation, and it may not be removed, but it may simply be flagged as problematic,
Exactly.
just like kind of like what Facebook's doing when it comes to
Hmm.
incitement of violence. Well, that breaks the law, so that would be dealt with accordingly. And we spoke about it last week. Elon went on record saying, "Look, we would comply with the laws of all the countries that we operate in, but we don't want to." We want to basically take a light touch on everything else.
Yep.
Now, of course, there's a number of other issues, including like harassment, for example. But Twitter has been building in tools already that to help you block people and also
Hmm.
control the people who can reply to your tweets as well, which is great. But that way you don't have to see necessarily all of the craziness that happens there, and you can choose to follow or not follow people as well. And that's the thing too, with Donald Trump being on the platform and being deplatformed, which one could argue whether that makes sense for the head of state, given that there are many other much more problematic heads of state that have said far worse things than Trump has, and they are still on Twitter. So he should have to follow the same rules as everyone else. Trump said he's not going to come back to Twitter no matter what. We'll see. He says he's going to stick to Truth Social, which he's only ever posted on once. So we'll see about that.
He'll be back.
The fella loves an audience, but I'm sure a bunch of people will again freak out even further if he does return to Twitter, right? So whatever. We'll see how it goes. I mean, it's interesting times, if nothing else. So one of the other issues that Elon touched on was possibly open sourcing the algorithms, so they're not so much of a black box, so people can see how things work, and maybe other coders can contribute to said algorithms and whatnot. Addressing spam and scam bots. There's a lot of bots, automated scripts that do things on Twitter and can be the one of the operators of harassment, for example, or or preventing scams and so on. And those are problematic. So there's got to be ways to clean that up. I mean, Elon's a product guy at heart, not somewhat more hardware, but he was involved in the leadership on the software for the Teslas, of course. So there is a bit of that. So we'll see what ultimately emerges from that. There's a lot of brigading that goes on, whether it's real people or bots, and that can be really challenging for people. And women tend to be the target of a lot of that stuff as well. And anyone who has controversial or unpopular opinions, and that's the thing, is like things can be so polarized and so much political discourse. It doesn't matter what side you're on, you can get brigaded. So Elon had also alluded to authentication of people, and I think this would be a great way to reframe the whole verified Twitter badge. It's simply, it's like, rather than being notable, how about you just prove you are who you say you are? Boom, you're verified. And maybe there's a cost associated with that. We'll see. Maybe it's part of Twitter Blue, but that's what it should be. Like, if we're trying to discourage, if people want to be anonymous trolls, cool, then they can have an anonymous troll account. If you want to be a real verified person and be able to use some of the advanced features that Twitter has to offer, then you follow the steps to be authenticated. Facebook has that kind of thing, and for better or for worse, but Twitter seems to be where that is most problematic. But people got freaked out by the phrase "authenticate all humans." It's like, okay,
I think he's talking about the verification check mark. So you got that little blue with the check mark in the middle. I think that's what he means by it. That's how I interpreted what he was saying. The interesting thing there is, a couple years ago, Twitter had opened that up for a very short amount of time, that any old person, me or you, not a famous person, not a public figure, could apply to have that verification badge. But they closed it quite quickly. I'm assuming
because they got brigaded.
Yep. They were overwhelmed. They just didn't have the resources to deal with it or how to verify everybody. And they were like, whoa, we didn't realize this was going to be as big of a thing. To this day, if you go, there's like a site you can go to about getting the blue check mark. To this day, if you go there, it still tells you, like, come back, like, we're working on this. So like, I do think that's something that has been, like I was saying before, one of those things that it's on their minds already. It's been in the works. It solves kind of a couple issues at once. Listen, I'm cheap as hell. I'm not necessarily going to pay for like a Twitter subscription. If they were like, it's $1, it's $5, you have to verify yourself on this platform, blah, blah, I'd do it for a one-time cost and say, yes, this is a real human, like whatever. Now, most people aren't going to do that, which then we don't really solve the bot issue if most people aren't willing to pay for the badge. But I do think that's what Musk means when he's talking about authenticating humans.
Exactly.
I think he's talking about just making sure you're who you say you are. You don't need to be a famous person.
Yeah.
And
it's not as nefarious as it sounds.
No, people just making stuff up and like reading where there's nothing to be read, like,
Well, of course, now a number of Twitter employees are clutching their pearls online as well, because obviously there's going to be some uncertainty. Will there be cuts at Twitter? I don't recall how many employees they have, but are they operating at the sort of efficiency they should be? Could they be more profitable for what they actually accomplish? A lot of, fear, uncertainty, and doubt at the moment, but you've got uh, folks saying things like, someone just tell me if I'm rich or fired, please?
That's
So if they
funny.
have stock options, of course. So that's another whole angle too, and that's always challenging when you work for a company that is being acquired, because changes happen, and change can be painful sometimes. Sometimes that
Mhm.
involves redeploying of people or actual layoffs, and that's never fun. But there's a number of people who are philosophically uh, contrary to Elon Musk as well, and some folks might leave. There might be some attrition, and he'd probably go, "Cool, you're doing your job for me."
Mhm.
And
Exactly.
another little wrinkle to this whole story too, and we did allude to it, I believe, last week, is the Jack Dorsey angle. Jack Dorsey, one of the original three co-founders of Twitter, who was once CEO in the early days and was I'm not sure if he was ousted per se. I think he was. Dick Costello took over as the grown-up in the room and helped Twitter become a real business. And then a number of years later, Jack came back, and but then he sort of got distracted by his other company, Square, which is now called
Mhm.
Block, and people had some concerns about that, investors, perhaps board members and whatnot. So he's, especially with Jack getting super into like Bitcoin and stuff like that, and he was also like a little bit absentee. He was in like Africa for 6 months. So people are like, what's Jack got going on here? So he left last year, but Jack and Musk, as we mentioned last week, seem to be aligned on a number of issues, including the potential open sourcing of the algorithms and decentralization of Twitter. Jack said, Elon is the singular solution I trust. And then he gets a little bit woo. I trust his mission
Yeah.
to extend the light of consciousness. Well, and when you see this
Okay.
this photo of Jack from last year, you
Oh
kind
my
of
lord.
see where he's coming from here. He's gone full COVID with the shaved head and the
Yeah.
long beard and the tie-dye
Yeah.
shirt. So he's saying things like, I love Twitter. Twitter is the closest thing we have to global consciousness. The idea and service is all that matters to me, and I will do whatever it takes to protect both. Twitter as a company has always been my sole issue and my biggest regret. It has been owned by Wall Street and the ad model. Taking it back from Wall Street is the correct first step. So again, making Twitter private, it
Mhm.
eases some of the pressure from public investors, shareholders, and board. You don't need a board anymore, and you can sort of carve your own destiny when you have a patron like Musk, to give it some room to grow in its own way without the public spotlight of behind the scenes. And Elon claims to not be so interested in the financial side of it, which of course investors would always be a little flummoxed by. One of the things that Jack touches on here, and this is something that I've spoken about with friends, is he says, in principle, I don't believe anyone should own or run Twitter. It wants to be a public good at a protocol level, not a company. Solving for the problem of it being a company, however, Elon is the singular solution I trust, and so on. So the idea, and I think we may have touched on this last week, is that we have protocols for the web. We've got HTTP. We've got protocols for email, um, IMAP, POP, SMTP. There are some protocols for chat like IRC, and I believe Slack was built upon that. But it's IRC, the raw IRC seems to be still pretty nerdy. We don't really have great um, universal protocols for messaging. I mean, there's text messaging, SMS, and MMS on cellular networks. Of course, we're having trouble getting to RCS, which we've talked about in the past as well. But we don't have great universal protocols for messaging and for whatever it is that Twitter is, like
Mhm.
public, like microblogging is technically what it is. So if Twitter was decentralized, open source, and made into a protocol, then anyone could sort of build on that in certain ways. They opens up Twitter clients again. There used to be amazing array of Twitter clients in the old days before Twitter really started restricting API access. You have to figure out how servers would work. Would you have a series of federated servers like we do with Mastodon, which can be confusing? So there still has to be some way to coordinate all of this. Would you have crowdsourced content enforcement, or at least flagging, as we talked about? What do you think about this aspect, Tasia, of Twitter becoming not so much a company, although there will be a company there, but maybe it would be more like a Red Hat Linux or something, which is still dealing with an open source sort of product and trying to add value in its own ways. And there could be others adding value in their own ways. Do you think that's an approach that could work?
I mean, I think it could work. I think it's something that Jack has wanted from the beginning, which is probably part of the reason why he was ousted the first time, because he's not focused on necessarily on running it like a company and making money. And any investor is like, I have to pay bills. So like,
bingo,
exactly. So I do think it could. I think he's a bit ethereal here in his, musings. But I do think at the core of what he's saying, I agree with, which is in terms of like, you take another person that, like, Musk is a weird one to me in terms of like, and by weird, I mean good, in terms of like, he's a creative genius, but he does also dabble in the nitty gritty, product software kind of thing when he has to. So like, it's this,
he's an engineer at heart. Yeah. He dives deep for sure.
Exactly. So it's this combination of like, you don't just have the ideas guy, like, like that's how I am when I think of stuff. It would be great, this. And then, you need people to build it. And how do we make money off it? Well, I don't know. I just have the idea. So I think he can help bridge that gap a little bit, but it'll be interesting to see how it all plays out and how it works. I mean, I'm not gonna be as ethereal as Jack over here about it. It's Twitter. I always think of Twitter as like, because obviously, I love it, but it's like, remember in school when you were taught free writing and it was like, you weren't supposed to think, you were just supposed to just start writing. It's like micro free writing to me, which gets people in trouble. Delete your old tweets, people, if you haven't, because they gonna come for you one day. But it's like that. So I don't know. I mean, are we all just overthinking it?
We could be.
It's 140 characters.
No, 280 now, remember?
Well, 280. I'm not here for the long tweet.
Okay. Speaking of free writing, that reminds me, in grade 12, in one of our classes, I think I started a story with a single line, a certain number of words, and just pass it on to one of my classmates. And it circulated around the class a few times. And we just wrote this long, crazy story. And I still have it somewhere, just all handwritten. It was kind of like its own absurd exercise in free writing. Because when you look back, it's like, what do we think?
Your teacher's like, you're passing notes. You're like, no, we're not. We're writing a story.
It's excuse me, it's literature.
You're like, this is Twitter.
In 1989. So one of the solutions that has been proffered is there's an article by David Pierce on The Verge saying Elon and Musk and Twitter can fix free speech by acting like a messaging app. So this is an interesting take, and I'm not sure how I feel about it, because Twitter, by its nature, is public. It's been referred to as the digital town square. And that's why people are so concerned about the free speech aspects of it. Because when you get tossed from Twitter, you lose a lot of exposure. There's so many journalists. Most journalists are on there, not to mention like celebrities, politicians, athletes, and so on. So that's why Twitter has always had an outsized influence on the culture, is by the nature of the sort of people who are on it. And then the reach that it would get when you have tweets being embedded in blogs, news stories, talked about on the radio, on television, and so on. It really outperformed compared to its size, which was it peaked, I think, around 350 million monthly active users. And it's kind of been at that for a while. It may have grown a bit since then, but it was for a long time was at that. But its daily reach was like over 1 billion people. It's because it's in the air, so to speak. So this take on making it more of a vehicle for free speech is interesting because it talks about maybe there's the communities feature which has been built where you can tweet to limited numbers of people, but then it's saying really improving the DM functionality for direct messaging. And there were some enhancements we talked about a couple of weeks ago with improve the search feature. But yeah, free speech is great, but when it's like just one to one or one to few, that's a messaging service. So then you're competing with
Exactly.
WhatsApp and
Yeah.
WeChat
That's
and,
not
and
Twitter.
iMessage and all that. So yeah,
It's not Twitter,
mhm,
and people don't want people in their DMs in Twitter. Like,
mhm,
when I think of my Twitter DMs, it's typically business related, it's typically something in the creator space, creator to creator. It's like a quick moment, a one-off to connect on something. It's not I'd like to interview somebody that's active in Twitter DMs. Do you know what I mean? Like,
yeah.
all the time, using it like I don't wanna use it that way. I think this is a horrific idea.
But some people
Sorry,
use it
David
like,
Pierce.
yeah, but it's amazing. Some people, and some of this is generational, but some people use Instagram like as a messaging app as well,
So
because that's where
listen,
most of their friends are. So if you've got most of the
well,
people you're communicating with are on Twitter, then like, yes, but I'm not sure if
and
like
so
that's
this is a
really a free
difference to
speech
me,
thing.
though.
Like, yeah,
It's not,
yeah,
and this is a difference because I do that with Instagram too. Like, my friends
mhm,
and I will, it always starts with sharing of something that we've seen on the platform,
yeah,
and then we back and forth. But then at some point, that conversation is over, and we're still moving back to our messaging app. Like, we're
mhm,
still having our main communication with each other back on our app. And even something like an Instagram, when people try to message on that, I have that locked down where, like, they have to request it, and, like, I don't ever respond to people I don't know trying to DM me on Instagram. So, like, again, Instagram is not, yes, of course it has the function because we want to share these stories, we want to share these posts, and oh, look at this, or ha ha ha, but that's not what it is at the core of it. And that's the same with Twitter. It's not a messaging app. That is not going to solve your issue, or however you think that's going to help this free speech issue. Because people are already messaging each other with whatever they want to say. So how would this do you know what I'm saying? Like, this doesn't then stop them. Well, let's take this into the DMs because no.
I muted myself. Sorry,
I was like,
uh,
I can't.
because I have to clear
Yeah.
my throat a lot, so like I don't want to do
Mm.
that on the air. One of the things that makes me a little crazy in this world of fractured messaging is being able to go back and find conversations like, was that in text? Was that an
Mhm.
email? Was that in
Agreed.
LinkedIn? Was that in Facebook Messenger? Was that it's like, I wish I long for the days of there was an app called Adium back in the mid to late 2000s, which brought MSN Messenger, Yahoo Messenger, ICQ, and others all into one. I wish there was something today that could do that. So at least you would be able to search just one place for your messaging. I get, okay, email separate. And like when people try
Yeah.
to message me through LinkedIn, I almost always move the conversation over to email if I've got their email address. It's like, come on, let's just because I'm a hoarder. And so I have like pretty much all my emails, like all the way back to 1996. And it's nice. And really, when
Mhm.
you've got a good, powerful search feature, whether
Yes.
it's on your email client or in Gmail, if you make bad life choices, then at least
The
it's
best life
all
choices.
there for you.
I'm
But
the
with
same,
messaging,
though.
like where? I've got to look at all these different places. So yeah,
Yeah,
I'm not
that's
down for DMs.
interesting
Yeah.
because sometimes I use Franz
Ooh,
on desktop,
okay.
and that combines, like, a bunch of messaging services, including email.
Hmm.
I have not checked to see if they have a mobile app, only because I don't want another
Mm.
freaking app. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
in terms of what you're just saying, that would be a good point because I literally just did that same thing the other day. Was like, did I send this to her via Instagram DM? Did I like I message her? How did I send? And I was like trying to find the media
Mhm.
that I sent. I was like, well, yeah. Welcome to our problems in 2022.
Now, does Franz have a searchable archive?
I don't know. I should check. I will check and let you know.
Okay. Because that
That could be helpful.
that could be helpful indeed. Okay, let's move on. One last thing on this. We're still in follow-up, if you can believe it.
Oh Lord.
One last little wrinkle to this, and just you get your quick take on there. So this is from Ars Technica, which is a very well-respected, more technically oriented technology website blog. Here's a simple way Elon Musk could make Twitter better, and basically what Timothy B. Lee suggests is to get rid of the algorithm and go back to a strictly chronological feed. And to that, I say, hear, hear,
Yep.
because the algorithm, whether it's in YouTube or Facebook or Twitter, is they're just the source of so much angst. And it's like, how do you radicalize people? But it's how they get engagement, because these organizations, they're responsible to their shareholders. They have a fiduciary responsibility, and how you become more profitable is to get more engagement, and then you get more ad views. But I wish that, you can go back to the chronological view if you wish. With Twitter, I think it'll stick. With Facebook, you have to do it every time. You got to keep
Every
changing it back,
time.
because
But
it's been.
Twitter had a glitch a couple weeks ago.
Mm-hmm.
I'm going to call it a glitch because I don't know what else. I don't know. And it wasn't just me,
Mm-hmm.
and I tweeted about it. And I was like, this new timeline though, like I cannot. Like I was just like, every time I went into the app,
Mm-hmm.
it threw me back to like their algorithm of junk. I could not get my feed. I wanted to start where I left off, which is one of the things I love about Twitter is I can leave the app for hours, come back, I'm
Mm-hmm.
still where I was 3 hours ago, and then I can scroll back to go to most recent and all that kind of stuff. There was about a 3 or 4 day period where I was like, I don't know if I can use the app anymore. Like it's completely ruined my experience on the app. And other people were thinking the same thing. And then one day I woke up, went back on, and it's back. Like it didn't
Hooray.
happen. So I don't know if they were testing something else and people were losing it. And so they were like, never mind, never mind. And they never said anything about it. They were never like, no, this is it now. This is the new timeline.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm really not sure what they were doing. And it wasn't just me, but I don't know. So now I'm back to where I can like leave it where I was like 3 hours ago and I'll still be there. So unless you like close it out completely.
Are you a Twitter completist, Tasia? Where like back in 2010, when I wasn't following quite so many people, I would literally scroll back to the last tweet I recognized and then go and catch up. Do you still try and do that?
I used to. I no longer scroll all the way back because there's
Yeah.
just so much.
Yeah.
But I do like to start where I've left off, even if it was 4 hours ago. It's
Right.
just like I just want to see mentally. I just like seeing it in that order.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like also for me as a user, which would be interesting feedback for Twitter, which I'm sure they know, is I spend less time on that app if they bump me to the top and they bump me to random junk. I just go, okay. And I just think I don't want to go back through all this. Whereas if you leave me where I was, now I'm spending more time on your app. Now I'm engaging with more tweets. So it's like, just leave it alone.
It's funny because there's a certain number of people that don't want core things to change, and then there's other people who like criticize Twitter for never changing because there was a stagnant period up until like about
Nobody's
last
going to be
year.
happy.
Exactly. You can't please. Like Will always says, I think that his mother says you can please none of the people none of the time, something like that. Says his mom, someone else. Anyhow, that's it for Elon and Twitter follow-up this week. So let's move on. More algorithm stuff. But I'm glad we were able to get your take on some of those things. And there's, again, just at that one bit of news about the offer being accepted. Now there's so much additional, so many additional implications from that. Last week, we also talked about Netflix and their earnings call, which they said they had lost 200,000 subscribers. We also talked about, how Netflix is doing in the content department, and with I mentioned that whenever I see the red N in the top left corner of a lot of shows, I often just scroll on by because there's a whole lot of trash. But they still have good, they have gems once in a while.
Oh yeah.
Squid Game. We've got season 4 of Stranger Things coming up. I can't think of anything.
Grace and Frankie.
Sure, Altered Carbon was good, although I never got a chance to see it. Lost in Space is okay, but it's one of the whole 80-20 rule, and they're kind of like Samsung. They just throw so much spaghetti against the wall and see what sticks. But they had first mover advantage. They're the ones to beat. They're still the 800-pound gorilla, but you get Disney Plus, Amazon Prime Video nipping on at their heels, and even Apple TV Plus to a certain extent, and then you've got Hulu and you've got Paramount Plus, and one of the things that we didn't mention last week when that loss of 200,000 subscribers is that they actually lost 700,000 subscribers by pulling out of Russia. So they were actually up 500,000 subscribers, which is still far short. They were anticipating they would be up by about 2 million subscribers. So they fell way short of their targets, and their stock price took a beating. But just to correct the record a little bit there, because these things can often get lost in the sound bites and the headlines, is that, yes, they lost 200,000 subscribers net, but 700,000 of the total calculation there was by pulling out of Russia. So
gotcha.
I thought we'd clear the air a little bit there. We also talked about how they're thinking of finally clamping down on password sharing. They figure there are millions of accounts being shared, and they
encourage it. Do you remember a couple years ago they tweeted, "Love is sharing a password." Like that's they encouraged it.
And at the very worst, it was benign neglect because they were busy growing, and they thought this would help get exposure, and other people would eventually upgrade. But there's a lot of people who still never upgrade and pay for their own. So one of the things that they are, I believe, going to be rolling out is a way to officially share your account and add people on for just a couple of dollars a month, etc. Another option that they're looking into that we forgot to get into last week was the possibility of adding lower, cheaper tiers. Because like here in Canada, I think the regular Netflix tier is up to $14.99 a month.
That's just the regular.
Well, that's two streams of HD, and if you want 4K, I think it's like $17.99 a month, something like that. So it keeps going up and up and up over time. I remember when we first got in, to be fair, this was like 11 or 12 years ago. It was like, like $9.99. I can handle that. So they're looking at introducing some more affordable tiers supported by advertising. Just like Hulu does and others that are. What are your thoughts on that, Tasia?
I think I have like premium Netflix or whatever it's called. And the weird thing for me is because I was in Canada when I initially had Netflix, it's still technically a Canadian account. So I'm charged in Canadian, but I pay US. So I get that exchange rate was worked out well for me.
And you get to enjoy all the US content since that's where you're actually located.
That's where I'm at. And then exactly. And then when I travel, I get whatever content is happening there. But the premium plan US is $20 a month now. It's increased. Wow. It's insane. And so I got a notification a few weeks ago, could have been a couple months ago now, when they were first going to announce the increase. And yes, we have agreed to pay for premium because we have a 4K TV and whatever. I don't know why. And so when I saw the increase, and I don't know the exact exchange rate, but it was something like $24 or $20, and I was like, because I'm seeing the Canadian, which is still $20 US is still I turned to Brett and I was just like, something's got to give. Yeah. What are we paying all these streaming platforms now? It's good. It's more money than what we were spending. And we still have cable, by the way. So
same here. Cord stackers, not cord cutters, cord stackers.
Yeah. So suddenly it's bing, 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 I pay for all the streaming services. Brett pays for the cable, and I said to him, you better binge your Disney Plus, baby, because I am cutting that. Like, I was like, we got too much going on. Like, we don't watch it. But it's crazy to me that I understand, and I love Netflix. They're one of my top two
Mhm.
of one of my top three, really, of the three
Okay.
platforms we stream on.
Mhm.
Love Netflix. So I'm not going anywhere. They could go up to $30 and I'll bitch about it, but I'll still be there. But it's just like, that was a hard pill to swallow, to be honest, when that jump happened. And I just thought, man, you better be pumping out way better content or buying the rights to old shows I want to watch all the
Mhm.
time
Mhm.
if you're going to expect people to pay this. And that's initially when I read that they're losing these customers. Well, if there's cord stackers like us, it's like something you decide
We're
which
bad with
one you
money.
want to cut.
Uh-huh.
Learn from our mistakes. But you do come to the point where you decide, okay, now I am paying for cable and like 5 streaming platforms. What
Yeah.
am I cutting? Like,
Yeah.
what don't I watch? And for those people that are like maybe not into reality TV shows, Netflix probably is going to be on the chopping block for them. I like some of the terrible reality shows on
Mhm.
Netflix, so like I'm all in, but people may decide to stick with more like an HBO Max or Amazon Prime because you already have Prime.
Mhm.
Like, you know what I mean? So like, it's just becoming a little too expensive. And I think they need to slow the roll, especially when they're going to start charging for sharing the passwords. And I get it. It's like the Google Photos thing to me. We all had it free for so long. I understand. You're a business. I get it. My mom is on my account. If I have to pay $1 or $2 or $4 or whatever extra so she can just stay on the account and doesn't have to pay $20 a month, I will do that. You know what I mean? Like, I
Mhm.
don't care. But it's just like it's getting really costly for people. And the whole point of streaming in the first place was no commercials, TJ. That
I
was the
dig.
whole thing of
Yeah.
why we were like, streaming's so great. It's on demand when we want it at our fingertips. We could binge rip through all these shows. One of the first changes, I don't know if you remember, that Netflix made back in the day that other platforms started doing was releasing content weekly, episodes weekly or
Mhm.
sporadically, because they realized, how do we keep people on a platform when we release all 10 episodes right now? They binged, they've left.
Yep.
So that was the first way they changed, was some things were released all at once. Sometimes they still do that now, depending on the series. There's a part A to this season and a part B is going to come out, whenever, right? Or whatever it is, or if it's a weekly release thing. But the interesting thing was the weekly release shows, at least the couple I watched, never got picked up again from Netflix. I thought they were good,
Mhm.
but they didn't continue to do them. So I don't know if that was their research showing that people were like, no, the point of this platform was for me to sit down, binge until I see are you still watching? Yup. Like, not move
Are you
until I
still
see that.
it should say, "Are you still conscious?"
Exactly. You still alive? Yup. So, like, it's just, it's interesting because I hope they listen to the people. I hope they listen to the consumers, and consumers will tell them.
Mhm.
This is what I always say with everything, not just streaming platforms, but we really do hold all the power. If y'all just stop buying the stuff you were bitching about and everybody just did that, guess what? That's the change. If there's no market for it, like, we control the market. People don't realize consumers have all the power. It's my rant.
Yeah. So there's a whole lot in what you've mentioned there, and I'll see if I can remember
Yeah.
some of the things that one is the economics are different if you cancel cable. And that's what the smart people do.
Mhm.
Gray canceled cable a long time ago. So as far as he's concerned, he's still in the black because all the streaming services that he pays for added up are still cheaper than what he was paying for cable. So
Yep.
when we wise up and eventually cancel cable, but some of us want to watch our favorite hockey teams.
That's what I'm saying. It's
Yeah.
sports for me, man.
Yeah. So that's one issue. And if you're not into sports ball, and then Gray is not so much. So I get that. We actually cut our cable packages way down a couple of years ago because we saw that our streaming costs were
Yeah.
going up. Another ang- uh, angle to this story is one is you mentioned reality TV programming.
Mhm.
Netflix never had that kind of stuff in the past. And I
No.
remember talking to them about it, and they're like, "Oh no, it goes stale too quickly." So obviously they've had a change of heart about that. And I think that has been
Big part.
part of Netflix's decline in prestige a little bit as time has gone on, because they've lost the rights to a whole lot of programming. Disney and others are clawing back, to their own services like Disney Plus. Netflix has been creating a lot of its own content, and some of it's been quite good. But you remember, like when they released House of Cards, which is one of their very first originals, it was prestige TV.
Mhm.
And Stranger Things is great, but it's not exactly prestige television. It's not exactly HBO. And now that they're getting into a lot of quote unquote trashier stuff and a lot of reality TV and whatnot, it almost sets the table for them to do things like, hey, we've got ad supported tiers now,
Yeah.
which the Netflix of 10 years ago, they would never have considered, because like the whole point was to not have
Yes.
ads,
I don't
right?
want cable. That's why I have you.
Hmm. So it's interesting to see how the worm has turned a little bit there, because HBO has done remarkably well with HBO Max. A lot of people were concerned that they were going to be diluting the HBO brand by putting a bunch of the other Warner content in there and just slapping Max on it. But it seems to be working out for
I
them.
love HBO Max. They're my
Yeah.
top ones.
And we
Great
get
content.
in Canada, we access HBO Max through programming through Crave. And again, Crave is one of our top picks here as well. Although their Apple TV app still doesn't do audio properly. We're still only getting stereo
Mm.
instead of surround sound. I got a bone to pick with them. But I actually should just contact them, see what's going on. Maybe it's a user error. So yeah, HBO Max, great. And then still keeping that aura of prestige. They're still putting out enough stuff that keeps people engaged and admiring of the HBO name. Euphoria, I mean, it's not one that I watch myself, but it's got a lot of buzz about it.
Mhm.
There's Game of Thrones is a few years ago now, and I believe I think the House of the Dragon will be on HBO, I believe. So that might reinvigorate things a little bit there. But then Apple TV Plus has really gone for the prestige stuff. Again, not a ton of content. They didn't license any back catalog from anywhere. They've just been doing originals, whether they're producing themselves or acquiring from elsewhere. And they're doing a lot of really great stuff, including For All Mankind and The Morning Show and Severance and others. So Netflix is kind of becoming a lot more basic, so to speak, and it's not as fancy. So do you think the ad, like don't want to beat this horse to death here, but do you think adding ads on cheaper tiers like Hulu does and others will work for them, or will it confuse people too much? Do you think it'll help them maintain their growth that they're looking to get, or will it backfire and actually see people go, oh, actually, that reminds me, Netflix isn't as good as it used to be, and I don't want my full price tier anymore, and I don't even think I want the ad supported tier, because then what's even the point?
I feel like it's gonna be that. I could be completely wrong.
Mhm.
It's just my biased opinion is if I'm given that choice, it's like, no. I don't. I do not watch commercials. Like besides live TV,
Yeah.
it's like we have the DVR. I DVR a set amount of shows,
Yep.
and that's what I use in terms of like cable.
And then you can
Like
skip the commercials when you've recorded
yep,
on the
I
DVR.
do not watch commercials. That's the point of living in the time that we live in.
Well said.
Okay.
Yeah, because those streaming ads are non-skippable, which is crazy.
Yes.
And I've noticed even on YouTube, which the ad load is increasing like crazy, but more
Yep.
and more of those ads are non-skippable as well. 15 seconds, sometimes even 30-second ads. It's like, yikes.
And 15 seems like torture. It's so funny.
So yeah, there's just a little graph here that is in one of the articles from thenextweb.com that shows the change in total US TV time. Netflix is still growing, although the growth has slowed. YouTube's actually declining, but YouTube's strategy has been all over the place for
Mhm.
YouTube TV and YouTube Red and YouTube Premium and all that kind of stuff. Hulu's staying steady at 3. Prime Video's growing a little bit. Disney Plus is growing a fair bit, growing to 70% there. And other SVOD seems to be increasing. So that would include things like Prime, Apple TV Plus, HBO Max, Paramount Plus, etc. So Netflix is still growing, but I think their growth has been slowing. So we'll see how things continue to evolve. A lot of these guys are playing the long game. Prime Video is a classic example. How many people are going to quit Prime because they get the other benefits of Prime, right? With the free 2-day shipping and so on. So that's brilliant. And Apple, I bet you a lot of the Apple TV Plus subscribers are just like, for us, for example, are just getting it as part of Apple One. You get your 2 terabytes of cloud storage, your Apple Music, your Apple Arcade, your Apple Fitness Plus, et cetera, et cetera. So you don't even think about how much you're paying for Apple TV Plus, which is, I think, in Canadian dollars, about $7 or $8, and it's not much. But so I think the larger players who have more to offer will benefit from that because the costs are kind of hidden a little bit. So anyway, there was one other thing I was going to mention, but I can't remember. So it must not have been that important.
About CNN Plus?
Well, that's another story altogether. So speaking of load, CNN Plus, it lasted 1/8 of a Quibi.
Yep.
Now, of course, there's a lot of schadenfreude happening here. CNN Plus launched to great fanfare and apparently $300 million in marketing. They were $5.99 US per month for not CNN programming, but CNN extra programming. So you could see a parenting show from Anderson Cooper or some other type of show with Chris Wallace, formerly of Fox News. He migrated over, and others. So it was it was almost like the DVD extras of CNN that somehow people were going to pay $6 a month for. Apparently, at last count, 10,000 people a day were watching it.
Oh dear.
And they were told they got Fancy Consulting Institute, McKinsey had projected that wouldn't be that hard for them to get to 1.2 million within the first year. If you're only at 10,000 right now, given that Disney blew out the doors right out of the gate, to mix our metaphors here, because they've had that very strong Disney brand, it seems like CNN overplayed their hand a little bit here.
Big time. It's like they knew, well, nobody's going to pay extra for news. So what can we do as a news outlet? I don't know, let's just make some originals that nobody really will care about. It's a whoopsie-doopsie. Now, I wonder if they have all those hosts have non-competes, and are forced to only do shows with CNN. Do you know what I mean? So say an Anderson Cooper as an example, a parenting show or any other show by him could probably do well on another platform. Do you know what I mean? Exactly. It would fit in, it would whatever, but they probably aren't allowed. So I'm wondering, are they just trying to make, I don't know what they were trying to do, but they lost a lot of money.
Now, the other angle to this is that CNN Plus was I was going to say love child, but that's not the right word I'm looking for. It was the pet project of Jeffrey Zucker, the former CEO, recently deposed CEO a couple months ago for having an undisclosed romantic relationship with another senior executive that went on for the better part of a decade. And CNN was also in the middle over the last couple months of an acquisition by Discovery Networks. And it seems that the leadership at Discovery was not super interested in CNN Plus as a play. So it was just going to be a matter of time before this got the axe anyhow, unless it was going to be a blowout, blockbuster. And it seemed like pretty quickly that was not going to be the case. So they're just like, you know what, let's cut our losses. And maybe we'll do something with this programming. Maybe we'll integrate it somewhere else into the CNN schedule, but as a standalone service, or even integrate into Discovery Plus, which is Discovery's own streaming service. We'll see how. I'm not sure how is that even launched yet. So, I mean, were you even tempted, Tasia, or would you pay, whether it was like I said, the DVD extras of a news channel or even news itself? Would you pay extra to have yet another streaming service like this?
Not at all.
No? Okay.
Not at all. I mean, it's just, I don't know who would. If you already watch CNN or get news from Twitter or wherever you get your news, I don't know.
Internet.
An online app.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Do you really need to see their 2-minute takes on super complex stories, and they're 8-second sound
Yeah.
bites from people taking them out of context. It's and
And this is the other thing.
TV news. Yikes.
People get so irritated about news and like, this is fake news and this is this, and nobody's impartial and everybody's biased.
Mhm.
Well, then who wants to watch the news anchor doing a show that's all about whatever the hell and bias and whatever, and like, we're just going to talk about kids today? And it's like, no, they have a view of somebody. They want that person to fit in that box. It doesn't work unless it was another network.
So this may be partly a symptom of the cord stacking burnout that we're talking about here. Had enough streaming? Yahoo News, actually USA Today, says Netflix and CNN woes show viewers may be reaching their limits. So there's 3 lessons from what we've seen in the last week or two from CNN Plus and Netflix's earnings results. Lesson 1, creating a streaming channel, even one with a well-known name, is no guarantee of success. Viewers are showing their limits when it comes to paying for multiple services. Lesson 2, the streaming market will continue to grow, but with so many players at this point, some will struggle to find a place with viewers. No doubt. Lesson 3, content is still king. To succeed, a content channel needs to retain subscribers with original, talked about, exclusive shows, movies, or specials, backed by a deep reserve of older, popular content that can be aired again and again to tide viewers over between hits. So
that's why Netflix is still successful. Even though people look at that and say, oh my God, they're panicked and they've lost all these subscribers, they hit on all of that. I'm actually surprised Paramount Plus is still a thing and it hasn't the bed yet. I can't believe it. I did like a free trial of it so that I could binge the final season of Younger, because it was only going to be on Paramount Plus, and then it wasn't going to go to network until like months later. And I was like, I don't want any spoilers. This is the final season. So like I did a free week trial, binged it, and then was like, okay, let me see what else is on here. Nothing. Terrible. I canceled it during, I was still in the free trial, and I was like, goodbye.
Well, 57 minutes in, we're finally done our follow-up.
Yep.
All right, let's get into the real stories now.
Let's talk about the show. You have another hour.
Exactly. I've cut a few things, so we'll just touch on the main things that we actually teased in the promo, and we'll try not to keep you too late, Tasia, because I know you like your beauty sleep. So a few oddball gadgets I've been collecting stories on for the last couple of weeks. A couple are in the mouse department. We had the Logitech Lift vertical mouse, and we've seen vertical mice before, but this looks very ergonomic and comes in an array of colors. We've got some black, we've got some dusty rose, and some light gray. And matching keyboards, of course, for the colors. The article that we talked about actually shows some of their prototypes and mock-ups and whatnot. The idea being that using a mouse a lot all day, and traditional mice aren't necessarily the most ergonomic. I mean, I still rock the good old Apple Magic Mouse because I like the touch sensitive surface and that you can swipe sideways on it and whatnot. But it's probably not the most ergonomic, although it is pretty. And another mouse is a horizontal mouse concept there's a Kickstarter for. So it's not even in the market yet. It claims to reduce strain and boost comfort. But look at this thing. It looks like something you rub your feet on.
It's hard to reinvent the wheel with something like this. Do you know what I mean? So like the first ones from Logitech. I love Logitech. I have Logitech keyboard and mouse and everything, and have like a better ergonomical Logitech one. But there is a place for something like a horizontal one where you're just taking the design and tweaking it a bit. If someone has like carpal tunnel or any type of wrist issues, and they're your casual user maybe, and there's stuff like that. The complete redesign conceptual one is where it loses me a little bit, because it's almost like you're trying to solve a problem that's not a problem, and you've made a worse problem. Because if you look at that, how you're supposed to hold the mouse or use the mouse, that strain on your fingers and your knuckle joints I'm not doing that all day, especially like an editor or somebody
Yeah.
that's there's absolutely zero chance. I don't know
Well,
who that's for.
yeah, it's one of those things. It could be a don't knock it till you try it, because what it's looking to do is reduce the strain on your upper wrist and the side of your hand. But it looks like, unless you're holding it exactly how you're supposed to, that it could introduce additional strain to
Yeah.
your fingers. But the
Yeah.
idea with, like, one of the ways that most of us use mice incorrectly is we tend to just move the mouse around, move it using our wrist. You're not supposed to do that. You're supposed to use your arm and not move your hand around so much, but most of us just don't
Mhm.
do that. So maybe with having it a shape like this, where it's actually quite I don't know, quite small and just and wide, that maybe you'd be more likely to move your whole arm around. I'm not sure what they're going for, but it's called the what's it called here, the concept picks. So they have a Kickstarter there. It's apparently the mouse prevents the fingers from being too warped. Okay, so
What?
we'll see about that. And the other another entry in the sort of interesting gadget department: Asus hot dog bun shaped portable monitor might look awkward, but it could be a useful tool for creatives. The ProArt display has a 32:9 aspect ratio and a built-in dial. I'm not sure what the dial's for. Maybe we can look at that. But look how wide this big boy is, Tasia. Is this something that you
Yeah.
could see as being useful for yourself? It's only a 14-inch panel, so it's not very tall, but it's hella wide.
I don't know exactly because, like, with that pixel display ratio, I'm not really sure what I would use that for. Maybe there's like design folks that would want to use that
I think it's
for
telling that they don't even
something.
show any sample applications on there. It's just like
Right, right. Like,
just
I'm
like
trying to think, like,
desktop.
how would this be used in the real world?
Mhm.
That's a question mark.
Yeah, apparently it looks like the dial is actually for raising and lowering the angle of the display. And often
Mm,
with, this looks like it would be a secondary display. Often what how they're positioned is as a secondary display for palettes. Your Photoshop palettes or your other tools, or it could be
right,
maybe even a preview window for your video editing software, and you can fit some other stuff in there as well. Like, again, is this a solution looking for a problem? Like, you wonder where some of
right.
these ideas come from. I mean, it's cool, and I love the effort, the and just adding to the heterogeneity of the market, because we see so much sameness as the technology market is so mature, the display market is so mature. And Asus isn't afraid of doing this. They have some laptops as well, which are kind of kooky too. Now, if that doesn't do it for you, how about some smart chopsticks that use electricity to make food taste 50% saltier?
So, it's just because of the brain connection that it's doing that? It's
And
not like
electricity.
okay.
So, Japanese food, beverage, and pharmaceuticals company Kirin recently announced that it and a team of researchers have developed a chopstick device that uses electrical stimulation to make food taste up to 50% saltier than it would otherwise. So all you got to do is electrocute
Oh,
your
for
tongue,
Pete's sakes.
and it makes things taste saltier.
Listen, love the idea. Again, execution would you can only use it in your house. It's not like a restaurant's gonna be like, "Here, everybody, strap this to your wrist, and then we're gonna clean these in between everybody using an electric chopstick."
Well, I think the new it was the prototype that had the strap, but the newer ones with a built-in battery would do the
So
trick for
you're
us. But
just
you'd have to
gonna
bring
shock
it
your
around with you.
tongue, and
Mhm.
that sends the signal that it's saltier?
Apparently,
Or the shock tastes like salt?
yeah. I mean, it's very low voltage, obviously, amperage. So it's just
How did they come up with this?
well, maybe someone was bored one day and was sticking their tongue to 9-volt batteries and thought, salty.
There you go. Listen, from a health aspect, it's good that we can fake the salt instead of adding the
Yeah.
salt.
Yeah, we don't
That's
wanna
a
increase
positive.
we don't wanna add to high blood pressure and hypertension, all that sort of thing, so
I'll give it a positive check on that.
and if they eventually come to market and wanna send us one, we give it a go.
We will get it on camera.
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be like the dog shock collars where you know what's coming, but you're still not ready for it.
All right, now we're finally here to the big show, the one story that Tasia has been waiting for. Chevrolet confirms a hybrid and all-electric Corvette are on the way. So I guess that's actually two things.
Yep, they're coming.
Take it away, Tasia. What's the story here?
So first they said the hybrid will come in the future. We don't really have dates yet. And then after that, we could see a fully electric Corvette. Can you even? So we have talked about stuff like this before in terms of, quote unquote muscle car or cars that people want to get with that little bit of rev in the engine and they want to hear that kitty purr. And it's like, do you think something like this will work? Do you think this is because this is not like, we've talked about this plenty of times. Basically, every single car company is moving to make almost every single vehicle in their lineup hybrid or fully electric at some point. And it's especially the last few years, a lot of these, sports car, muscle car manufacturers are doing that too. But we've had that discussion back and forth on, is that what you want when you get behind the wheel of that car? So like when I get into a Corvette, I want to feel it. You know what I mean? Like, is it going to be as sexy? Is it going to be as, part of the allure of a Corvette and cars like that are the 0 to 60 thing. I know we've talked about this before. It really has no meaning except for, bam, it just feels like it wants to go. If you're going less than, a certain mile per hour, it feels like you're not doing it justice, it's built to rock it. So it's going to be interesting. And I'm not saying electric cars can't rock it. They can, but it's just going to be interesting when you don't have the rush of the engine. And I'm curious to see, and I'm always here for greener earth, new technologies. Let's go and try to do the least of all evils, if you will. But I don't know. What do you think about that? Like, is it going to sell well for them? They're obviously not targeting what their normal market is. The older white man does not care. It does not want an electric.
Yeah.
But maybe they're trying to target to a younger demographic that's more environmentally conscious.
But still is intrigued by the notion of a hot car. And I think GM has been wise here to take it slow and see how the market has been reacting to some of the, say, performance model Teslas, like the Model S Plaid and the Porsche Taycan and others. And what seems to be happening, this is something that I've noticed just in the last couple of months, that a lot of traditional car folks who have been totally in the bag for internal combustion engines are starting to warm up to EVs now because they appreciate the performance that is being offered by some of these models.
Yes.
Especially off of the line. Like, they're very torquey. My 109 horsepower 2016 Kia Soul EV off of the line is like, it throws you back in your seat. Like, not like a Tesla, ludicrous mode will, but enough to feel peppy for city driving. And it's remarkable how fast you can go. You go in it without realizing how fast you're going because it's so quiet. Now, one of the questions that you allude to there is, without the roar of the engine, will it be satisfying for people? And I got to admit, that's part of the appeal of riding my motorbike, is like you crank the throttle and it goes and you feel it. And it's like, yeah. And there's like a weird kind of macho thing that goes along with that, maybe, but it's just maybe more macho than macho. It's visceral, right?
Yes.
But in an electric, you don't get that noise. You get this eerie, not silence, but eerie whine. And it feels like you're driving a future car, which is kind of cool in itself.
True too.
But you also get the rush of the speed, of the torque, and even the higher performance models have that speed throughout the entire torque curve. So one of the issues with mine is that once you're already going and then you floor it, it doesn't give you as much extra, right? But with the performance models of a lot of EVs, you, especially the dual motor ones and whatnot, you've got not just the torque, but you've got the raw horsepower, so that no matter how fast you're already going, if you stomp on it, it's going to go even faster, depending on how fast you're going, obviously. So that helps serve that need. Now, as for the sound, like some cars have been doing this for a while, where they actually pump in like fake noise into the cabin to make it feel like that it's you're making noise, even if your engine, because a lot of gas engines are getting quieter as time goes on as well. So maybe you'll see some of that with EVs. Now with this Corvette, we've got their hybrid version, which is their smart first step, will be coming in 2023. And like you said, there's no date yet on the pure electric version, but I think they'll probably learn a fair bit from the hybrid. And just like Toyota has done for more than a decade, and then they kind of waited a little too long before getting into the plug-in hybrid game just a couple of years ago, and we're still a ways off from seeing Toyota pure EVs. They've been playing it ultra safe.
They had said, they had said 2025, all the vehicles in their fleet are going to be. So we'll see. They're only a couple years off from that now. So will they hit it?
Yeah,
we don't know. But with this, it's like, because I get it. Like especially living here in Scottsdale, there's a lot of people, men, that like to rev their engines, and it's annoying. And it's like, I'm not gonna like drop everything and date you now. Like, I don't know what, very unattractive to
a noisy car. Excuse me while I take my clothes off.
Yes. Like you'll be sitting out on a patio having a nice meal, and all of a sudden you can't hear the person, because these losers are ripping, and so it's like, I get it. So from that standpoint, I get it. And I think that needs to be the new marketing for Corvette. Like when they're marketing these vehicles, make the quietness the sexy part of it. Make it stealth, like Batman, who would just like appear, and like you're outside of a club and it's like, oh, hello, didn't hear you come. Who's this? Do you know what I mean? Like, I think if they market it in that way, that could work.
As long as it's not creepy.
No.
Here's their tagline: silent but deadly.
It lasted 1 month, and then they changed that.
It got CNN plus.
It got CNN plus.
Well, I mean, because the other ones make so much noise, so much fanfare, but the deadliest ones are often silent. All right, so TBD. I mean, obviously, the image we're seeing on Insider or businessinsider.com is wrapped with the Dazzle ships sort of cloaking, so you don't see all the details. But the last few Corvettes have been pretty hot, and I know they've had a thumbs up from you. But it's cool because it almost looks like leopard print. It's like maybe they can attract a certain demographic of slightly older ladies. Get their own Corvettes.
It is a sexy car. My thoughts on that.
I have to ask you, once you hit your mid to late 40s, Tasia, how tempted are you to start rocking more animal prints? Wait, how does that happen?
I actually bought a animal print top the other day.
You're an early adopter. Wow, you're well on your way.
Woo!
So we have to start seeing. This is so close. This wrap. This is so close. I want to see an animal print. I want to see you in an animal print Corvette.
Okay.
By 2025. So at the other,
better make more YouTube earnings, and then we can
exactly
wrap it.
So in another offering, there's a 2023 VinFast VF8. So this is Vietnam's first EV for America, which is interesting. I got to say, it looks like the front end it looks like a Honda Accord got beaten with an ugly stick. But
it kind of does.
It's got 60,000 reservations globally so far. And, a lot of people don't realize that Vietnam's got its own auto industry. The government there, it's a communist government in name. So there's been a lot of homegrown brands there. But 2023, it's the first US bound. And then they've got a VF9, which is the larger sibling, and it's expecting to start delivering its first units of that. It's a 3-row. So, I mean, that doesn't look entirely unlike, say, like a Kia Telluride or one of the larger Hyundai SUVs as well. So, I'm still, like I said, I'm still a little, I'm not sold on the look. Do you have any thoughts here? Is this just me being an old man? Like, what is?
I mean, I don't hate it. It's just meh to me.
That
I
front
think
end is something else.
biggest thing they're gonna run into is like winning that new market share. Like why people here that are not familiar with a new brand when they know, all the tried and true North American brands, or even, some other Asian brands, they know these ones and they're more familiar with those cars. So that's going to be the hardest thing for them, is to win that market share. I agree with you on the front end. I don't think it's something where you're like, this is the coolest thing. I think maybe they needed to have a bit cooler. I don't mind the look of it though. I'm not offended by it.
The front end's almost got Pontiac Aztec vibes.
Yeah.
And the rear end is, it's not entirely dissimilar from what we've seen from like Kia and Hyundai and whatnot.
Yeah.
Like you said, like it's got a nice big front trunk, and a fair bit of storage in the back as well. So it looks pretty roomy. And it's got the typical EV stuff, nice big screen, pretty minimal interior. One of my pet peeves is lack of physical buttons. But that's just the way things are going. 15-inch touch screen, 292-mile range, $40,700, which US, which is pretty affordable. 10-year, 120,000-mile warranty, which is great for a new brand, and that's something that that Mitsubishi did for a long time, and Kia as well. When people are taking a chance on a newer or unfamiliar brand, they will offer long warranties to help people's comfort level. So yeah, TBD on this.
Yeah.
But I think we can all agree that CNET's new branding is, is a lot.
Really. I will say this. It's always nice to see more competition in this market, because the more we saturated it, the more options we give for people, prices are going to come down. Well, when there's not shortages, in normal times. And it's better in the end for the consumer that, these companies are having to answer to what we want and to outdo each other. And that I definitely like to see.
How do you feel about these? We've seen this a lot of different takes on automatic transmission gear shifts. We've seen dials, and this has got buttons. Honestly, it harkens back to some of the early automatic transmission cars from the 60s, where they were push buttons, almost like in your like radio buttons. And I have to admit, I prefer a stick myself, because it feels like you're pretending to drive a standard almost, even though you're not.
But not just that, is buttons get stuck, people. Okay, then what you gonna do when that button is stuck?
Stop eating French fries in the car, Tasia. It's the crumbs.
The crumbs.
It's like Ernie eating cookies in bed. Come on, Ernie.
It's the same argument you probably have with touchscreens. I mean, first of all, they get greasy as heck with our fingerprints. But second, it's like, you even know on an iPhone, like mine, I have an iPhone 11 Pro. It's not that old, relatively speaking, in the world of devices. Okay. It's already losing some of its sensitivity. And it's like, I take care of my stuff. So what are we going to do?
You know what part of that could be is so much hand sanitizer that people have been using over the last couple of years. And that
I bet you, I also wipe it down with like Lysol wipes.
Ooh, that could be part of it too. There's
Apple said I could. Okay, so I did.
People are finding that steering wheels in cars, a lot of them, the coating on them is deteriorating because people have been using so much hand sanitizer. There was actually a vehicle that we were looking at that was 3 years newer than what it was. It was the 2019 Kia Soul EV, and the bottom of the steering wheel was all ratched, and it could very well be because they have that. I think it's vegan leather or something, and it's just.
Yeah. Oh, it just gets eaten.
That's why
that's
why you gotta have the real leather. Sorry, Bessie the cow. So moving on, and we're always, it's great and exciting to always find new EVs. Again, more competition the better. We just got to get mining more lithium. Hey. And also increasing the power supply for the grid.
I say to you, the best of all evils, or whatever I said earlier, because nothing is,
Yeah. It's all about price.
perfect. It's what's the lesser of the evils? I don't know, because the whole mining thing. Anyway,
Yeah,
we won't get into that. But
it's complicated.
it's complicated. Okay, let's just make whatever choices we can make, and really, the cars we drive probably aren't the issue in the long run. But anyway,
all right. One last story before we wrap up and talk about our picks. Hopefully, you got your pick ready. And I've just included this. You can think of something quickly. YouTube's Super Thanks tipping is now available to partners worldwide. You can customize your tip comments too. What's the deal with this? And is this a good addition to YouTube's monetization option for creators? Tasia, being a YouTube creator yourself?
It is. It's just another way that people can, make a little bit of money on YouTube. Like for me, because I've had this enabled for a bit, it's really like a couple bucks I've ever gotten, like legitimately a couple of dollars ever. I mean, the user, like the viewer, has to understand what it is and like how to use it. But I do think it's just another really great way, like that YouTube is monetizing creators. Like when you think of all the platforms we have that can be monetized for creators, to me, YouTube is still the one with the most potential for earning for people. I mean, I know obviously there's things like OnlyFans, or like some people do really well on TikTok, but you have to be like the niche of the top. YouTube is a breadth. Anybody, if you stick with it, can be monetized and make some type of earnings. So this is just another really great way. What Super Thanks are is basically like a tip. So if you really like somebody that you watch and you watch their content all the time and you just feel like, wow, it's really great that this person makes, I don't know, all this tech content and Google how-tos, and they do it for free.
Who could be that?
I wonder who that is. And they don't get paid. So it's just a way that, viewers can be like, here's $1 or here's $2. And like, this was I really love your channel, And then on the back end, what the creator will see is you can see like your revenue sources. So that's under, I can't remember if it's listed under the Super Thanks, but it's listed under like a different area. But I think it's wonderful that it's opened up to more now, which is great. So I just think I'd love to see YouTube promoting it to the viewer. Like, I'd love to see those promotions to let viewers know, like, are you loving like all this free content from your creators? Like, here's a really easy way, like it's a lower risk thing to ask of people. When people ask for people to join a Patreon or people to join like a subscription thing, that's a bigger ask.
So I got to sign up for another account.
Exactly. I got to sign up for something. Now I'm paying money every month for this. Is this actually worth it? I'll just go to somebody else that's free and use their stuff. And it's a big thing. And then it's also a lot on the creator too. That has to I have to give you something for being part of this Patreon. Like I can't, I have to give all this extra stuff. And there's a lot of people that maybe can't make all this extra content or can't, so that's just a little way to just say, viewers can say thanks. I just wish YouTube was promoting it more to let people know, like, hey, it's really easy. You don't have to sign up for anything. You're not doing this monthly. You're just, you could do it once and never do it again and whatever. So it's cool.
And for creators themselves, they have to be part of the partner program so that their channel has to be monetizable already. So that means 1,000 watch hours and how many subscribers? Is it 100 subscribers?
It's 1,000 subscribers.
Oh, gee whiz. Okay.
Yeah.
So the interesting thing is that this is YouTube playing catch up. Vimeo added the tip jar in 2012. So 10 years later, YouTube did this. I mean, they've been monetizing with advertising and super chat in the meantime, but it's like how Vimeo had HD years before YouTube ever did. I mean,
right.
Yeah, Vimeo's like fancy YouTube, right?
That's what I was going to say. People use those platforms completely differently. Exactly. So most people that are consuming YouTube content don't care that it's maybe not even HD. Like it's just that's not how we're consuming the content. And the super chat is really good on YouTube. But that's a very niche thing.
Can you explain what that is for
Yeah, so,
mom and
like
dad.
okay, so say for an example, I went live on YouTube. I could set up so, like, people can be super chat, meaning they can pay an amount to, like it would show me a badge. They get a badge, like, for say they paid $2 or $5 or $6, whatever it is, doesn't
Mhm.
matter. They earn a badge for buying a super chat, so it makes them feel great. They have this badge now. Plus, it kind of flags it for the YouTuber to be like, "Oh, this is somebody that's done a super chat." So then they'll are more likely to interact with that person who's now asked a question on a live stream or something like that. So it
Front of the
kind of
line.
works. Yeah, yeah, exactly. It kind of works two ways for the super chatter. They get a little badge, they feel good about themselves, and then the person will be like, "Oh, so and so, thanks so much for your super chat and to answer your question, blah blah blah." So they feel like they can connect with the person. Works very well for YouTubers that already have massive followings that are doing a lot of live streaming and things like that. It's not really something I don't think for smaller channels. So that's
Mhm.
why the thing like the thanks is
Yeah.
great because that's
Super
you don't need to
thanks.
have a big you don't need to have a big following. You don't
Mhm.
need, any of that. People can just do it.
They can donate between $2 and $50, but of course, YouTube takes a 30% cut. So we'll see how much outrage there is, given the people set their hair on fire about Apple's between 15 and 30% on the App Store and in-app purchases and Google Play
Yeah.
Store as well. 30% cuts, pretty hefty on this. We shall see.
It's the business of doing business with YouTube. They
Exactly.
make the rules and we're just living in their world. They can pull you out at any time and there's nothing you can do about it.
It's pretty clear that a lot of the most successful YouTubers don't rely purely on AdSense, like
Yeah.
advertising revenue from YouTube. They're either turning on super chat, maybe super thanks eventually, or they have a Patreon, and or they have merch, and so the smart ones are building other non-YouTube revenue
All
ultimately.
kinds of sources.
I mean,
Yeah.
you've got Mr.
Diversify.
Beast doing his own like burgers and stuff.
Oh yeah, the Mr. Beast Burger, they've got affiliates, they've got partnerships, they sell courses. A lot of these bigger YouTubers, AdSense is one of their smaller
Mhm.
incomes. So somebody like me, that's my when you look at kind of the YouTube realm or like the brand Tasia Custody, that aspect of the business, AdSense for me is the biggest chunk. Once you get to a certain point, what I understand from all these YouTubers is that's no longer the bigger chunk because as your audience grows, like you have zero control over what advertiser they're paying and like what your CPM is or RPM. You have no control. So that fluctuates and changes all the time. But as your audience grows, more affiliate links you might sell, you might get better partnerships. So now you're charging more for partnerships. So it tends to kind of shift for creators. So it's very interesting, but always here for ways that creators can more easily make money. And it's it's just such a cool thing. Like you can sit at home. I'm gonna play it down. Like it's a lot of work, but at the base of it is like you can sit at home and make content and get paid. And yes, it takes work. And yes, you have to build up to it. And yes, it's a commitment and you have to be consistent and all this shit. But it's very cool to think of where our grandparents came from and our ancestors. And it's like, man, I can just sit here on this camera and like make money. Never been easier.
Everyone has their own TV station now.
Yes,
You just got to find people to watch it.
exactly.
All right, so pick of the week.
You
What?
go first.
So this could be a TV show, a movie, a podcast, a book, a gadget, a restaurant,
I know what I'm going to
something
pick.
else that has caught your eye in the last week or so. And I will go first.
Okay.
And it is something that I'm standing on right now that I picked up today at Costco. Let's see if I can do this.
Uh-oh.
Mhm.
Oh, look at you. Is it helping?
It is helping because I'm here
It
in
is
the
helping.
Momentous HQ studio. We've got hardwood floors, And whether I'm standing on my bare feet or in slippers, by the end of our always kept to 1 hour long show, never
Of
longer,
course.
the legs get a little sore. Everything gets a little sore, especially with this aging body. And sometimes I steal our gel mat from the kitchen, which is great for keeping things feeling good when you're doing stuff in the kitchen. But it's a lot of work going back and forth. So get a special one, and this has got this is actually meant for standing desk. So to help the leg fatigue when you're at a standing desk,
Yes.
and it's got little knobbly things that you can massage your feet on.
Ah,
It's got
yeah.
little ball things that you can massage your
Okay.
feet on as well, and then it's got some heel things as well, and it's got some rails so you don't fall off. It's in my very limited trial so far today. I'm giving it a thumbs up because I tend to rock back and forth as it is, but now I can just really get in there
Squishy.
and the heel
Yeah.
and the arch and whatnot. And actually, it's kind of nice, and I'm sure it
Oh,
helps with
that's
blood
good.
flow as well. And yeah, it's available at. I couldn't find it on the Costco Canada site, even though I did get it at Costco Canada. But here's the on Costco.com Bird Rock Home Anti-Fatigue
Mm.
Standing Desk Mat, and it's showing $69.99 US. At the Costco I was at today in the Vancouver area, it was $29.99, marked down to
I
$19.99. So
was
I'd
gonna
never
say
even seen it
70 bucks
before.
is pretty,
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's actually cheap for a lot of these kind of gel mats and stuff that you see out there. It's not on a cheaper, not out of the realm of reason. Let's put it that way. But I'd never even seen this before, and it was already marked down. I go to Costco
yeah.
pretty much every 4 or 5 weeks, so it's score. I'm gonna try this out. And Costco's got a pretty liberal return policy, so if it didn't work out, take it back.
Mhm.
But yeah, I'm digging it so far. That's the Bird Rock Home Anti-Fatigue Standing Desk Mat. Get it at a
Oh, that's
Costco near
good.
you.
On sale now.
Until now, there's only 5 left at Costco
Go, go,
on
go.
Still Creek in Burnaby, BC. How about you, Tasia? What's your pick of the week?
Okay, my pick is not really tech related, though I guess you could get an audiobook if that counts.
Sure. Doesn't
But
have to be
it
tech related.
is the new memoir from Molly Shannon called Hello, Molly. And I
Uh-huh.
don't have it yet because it just came out. It's on
Oh,
my
you
list to
can't pick
buy.
that yet.
Yes, I can because
What?
it's on my list to buy and it's already a bestseller. It literally just came out. And I've listened to every single interview that she has done about this. And I am like, it's going to be epic. I adore her. I love her.
Mm-hmm.
And any interview she's in anyway, or any skit she does anyway, or anything, her shows that she does, I just adore her. So I'm like very excited to read this book because based on the interviews, there's a lot of stuff that we did not know about her growing up that helped shape her whole kind of comedy career. And
Mm-hmm.
I actually just listened to she's on another podcast I'm waiting to listen to with Brett, but I just listened to her on a different one. And she was talking about, actually, I think it was Howard Stern, and she was talking about where she, or it might have been Drew Barrymore or somewhere, where she got the idea for um, some of her most famous characters. And I won't give it away, but where she drew inspiration
Like
for
Mary Catherine Gallagher, Sally O'Malley, and so on.
exactly.
Yeah. Nice.
Exactly. And it's really it was the Jonathan Van Ness podcast, Getting Curious. She was on there. And I did not know that she had drawn inspiration from where she did for some of these characters. And then it just puts a whole new spin on it. Cause then you're just like, oh wow, there's a lot more meaning behind that than what it just appears. But it's really interesting to hear her stories on how she even got on SNL and the tenacity, and when her and her friend moved to the city and knew nobody and were trying to get agents, and what they would try to do to get agents because people wouldn't take their calls, and so they would pretend to be each other's agent, like management rep, I'm calling on behalf of so and so, and they would just make calls for each other to try to get into agencies because what do you do to get your foot in the door? So it's just really interesting to see her tenacity and stuff like that. And it's supposed to be also funny humor mixed in. So that's my pick.
Good pick. Love Molly Shannon. Again, lots of memorable characters. And this week we'll allow it because it's just you and me. Don't tell Gray and Will. But we don't usually allow picks that one actually hasn't experienced yet. So we'll just keep it between us.
I feel like I've experienced half of it because I've listened to her talk about everything in the book. But like, yeah,
Well,
it's on my
add
list.
one more to your list. I haven't listened to it yet, but I see it in my queue. I believe she is on the new episode of Conan O'Brien Needs a Friend.
Yes, and that's the one I need to listen to with Brett because we listened to his podcast together. So I saw that and I was like, oh my God. So we have to listen together. I'm not allowed to
Awesome.
listen to him. Yeah. We love that podcast. That should be a pick because that is a great podcast.
Indeed. We'll save it for
He's
next
fat.
time. All right. And then last but not least is you had another great video on your YouTube channel. Tell us all about it.
I talked about some Google search tips. So we talk about like advanced search just a little bit. I talk about things like searching Google with an image. Did you know you could do that? Because you can. But yeah, so I don't want to give them all away, but there's a few good little things in there. And some of the comments, people didn't know a couple of the things. And I've done a bunch of Google search videos before. So I guess I'll just keep doing them. Why not? But yeah, there's a couple really interesting things. Like Google is so much more powerful than just Googling it, if that makes any sense. Like there's a lot of stuff you can search within date ranges, which I actually don't think I touched on that one here, but you can search within price ranges. Like, I mean, there's so much you can do. You could research competition all just in your little Google search bar by searching related. Hot tip. So.
And I see that I've been admiring your SEO game because you don't just say the best Google search tips, but you say the best Google search tips 2022 in your YouTube video title. Because when I'm searching for information, I often add the year there.
Yeah.
So some of your perhaps more advanced users where they're searching, whether it's on YouTube or even more likely on Google, when you want current information, you add the current year in there, and it's amazing. The savvy ones that do that. Sometimes it's simply a matter of retitling old blog posts or old videos.
Yeah.
But yours is current, which is great. So glad to see that out there.
I can do it every year.
Exactly. You've already got 956 views. Let's get it to 1,000, folks. 90 likes and 27 comments. Oh, looks like I already like that. I subscribe to Tasia Custodi at youtube.com/Tasia Custodi. And so should you. Where can people find your other work, Tasia?
You could just go to tasiacustodi.com, and that's where you can find everything.
Inquiring minds want to know, when are you going to have another podcast episode? Talk techie to me.
I tried so hard to get one out for this morning to talk all about Musk and Twitter, and it's just I think I'm just gonna have a conversation with you, and cut like 4 different podcast episodes out of it, and then that way I'm good for a few weeks.
Sounds good. You got to repurpose that content.
It's been since like January. It's embarrassing.
It's all right. Well, your fans are waiting with bated breath.
I'm sure
but
they are.
This has been fun.
My voice.
Our first just Tasia and Tristan TNT Power Hour and 37-minute episode. Find out more about Momentous at momentous.tv, facebook.com/momentous.tv, twitter.com/momentous.tv with Uncle Elon, instagram.com/momentous.tv, and on YouTube, search my name and look for the Momentous playlists there. Thank you, Tasia. I hope you and everyone else out there has a week that is truly